have a guest speaker this morning. Lori Bakewell has come to bring a message this morning, and I'm so grateful for her willingness to share. And so I know already how you're going to be blessed by that.
All right, y'all. Well, confession, I am a writer. I am not a public speaker. I have my notes, so just bear with me. So this is the story of a woman who misplaced her joy and what she learned in the process of reclaiming it. Spoiler alert, if you hadn't guessed, that woman is me. When Pastor Ashley asked me to speak today, I did not know what I was going to say. But operating on the principle of talking about what matters most, what has meaning to you, I thought I'd share this story, and I hope that it resonates. Quite a number of years ago, 16 actually, and that number really surprises me, I experienced what we might call a series of unfortunate events. I mean, these were life events, really, but they happened one after the other in a fairly condensed time frame. My mother died, my marriage ended, and my father's cognitive and physical well-being declined rapidly. Y'all, that was a lot. For two of these events, I was involved as a primary helper because I was the local kid, and any of y'all local kids out there know exactly what I mean. None of these events were unusual in the big scheme of life, but having them come one right after the other was perhaps a bit less than optimal. However, I felt like I was handling everything, and not just handling it, I thought I was handling it really well. After all, I was showing up, wasn't I? I was there helping with Mom's needs and their household needs, and when she passed, I was at her side holding her hand. I was selling the house I lived in as part of being a couple and moving to the home that would be mine alone. And yes, dealing with all that other stuff that comes along with a marriage ending and falls strongly in the category of, if you know, you know. Yeah. And then, much to my dismay, Dad's physical and cognitive challenges, which had somehow been amazingly well hidden by my parents, emerged in full force now that Mom wasn't there to help keep the truth from the kids. So there was that. But, you know, through it all, I showed up. I did everything I could, and I really thought I was managing and deserved a check plus. Was I happy? Well, nobody asked me, but if they had, I would have said, I'm happy enough. Was I joyful? You know, I don't think we ask each other about our feelings of or experience with joy very often, and I certainly never asked myself. I guess I would have thought that if I were happy enough, I must also have joy. No, not the case. I didn't know that then, but I was about to find out. It was the Christmas season, and we all love a good story of redemption and finding joy during the Christmas season. But really, it was actually the Christmas season. I had my tree up and decorated. I had baked gingerbread cookies, my family tradition from childhood on. I had done my shopping, mailed my gifts, made my list, checked it twice, and I was showing up for Christmas, doing all that needed to be done. Are y'all sensing a pattern here? Yeah. In a lovely burst of optimism, I arranged to meet a friend for dinner and then the Christmas Eve service at church. My siblings were having Christmas with their own families, and they were too busy for Dad. And all I'll say about that is that great Southern classic, bless their hearts. My children were in different parts of the country, so I made my own plan, and I thought it was a good one until Dad ended up in the hospital a few days before Christmas with pneumonia. And then the hospital decided to release him to rehab on Christmas Eve. And hospital protocol being what it was and still is, that process took hours. It's not like he could be alone for the transfer. He couldn't be dropped on the rehab doorstep like a Secret Santa gift gone awry. Hours passed, and I canceled dinner, and then eventually gave up any hope of getting to a church service. By the time I had him settled and peaceful, I headed home, promising to be back the next morning. It was late. I had no Christmas Eve dinner waiting for me, or a good conversation with a friend, or the comforting beauty of a church service. But I did have an incredibly adorable and loyal mutt named Charlie, who was delighted when I came in late that night and scrambled some eggs. And then after our eggs, I grabbed 2 of those gingerbread cookies and loaded Charlie into the car. We were going to reclaim Christmas Eve. We were going to take a drive down the road to the Gold and Silver Cup neighborhoods where Christmas lights abounded. And that's what we did. We munched our cookies and admired house after house of beautiful lights. But a small issue emerged. I'd not driven in Gold Cup often, and never at night. The streets and the courts all kind of merged into my tired brain, and so it was that I found myself lost. Now remember, it was late, I was tired, and if y'all have ever driven in there, you will know they all just go round and round and end up back on the same street, and it was awful. My sense of direction is not great anyway, I'll admit. That night, it was absent entirely. So to sum up the sad situation, I could not get out of the blasted neighborhood. I started to cry. The more I cried, the harder it was for me to navigate. And the more I cried, the more Charlie Dog tried to comfort me, and the harder it was for me to navigate. I even contemplated finding a house that looked somehow ready for an unexpected visitor and taking my pathetic self to the door for guidance. But luckily, I spotted a car backing out of a driveway, and I assumed, correctly, thank goodness, that it was leaving the neighborhood. I followed right behind, somewhat creepily right behind, but okay, I was beyond shame at that point. Long story short, I did get home. I stretched out on the floor by my tree with Charlie Dog smooshed up against me, and I cried and cried. Clearly showing up and doing what was needed was just not going to cut it anymore. What is going on, God? I asked. What am I missing? I'm a firm believer that when you ask a sincere question to God, you'll get an answer. Maybe not right away, but you get it. Once I mopped up the tears and dog snuffles from my face, I turned out the lights, and I headed to bed. On my bedroom mirror, I saw an affirmation that I'd written on an index card. I have a bunch of those all over the house. I still do. This one said, "You are a glorious child of God. You are joyful, serene, positive, and loving." I didn't have any major revelation that night, but as the days passed, I read that affirmation again and again, and slowly something started to sink in. As a glorious child of God, being joyful, serene, positive, and loving is the way that I can act in His energy. And I felt then, as I do now, that it all starts with joy. Because when I really considered my life, I realized that while I felt I was happy enough, and I was certainly showing up and doing all the things, I had not claimed joy in quite some time. So there's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is situational. You all know that quote about happiness being like a butterfly, right? And it flits along and it lands on your shoulder. Ah, how nice. And then it flies away. Happiness is good stuff. Don't get me wrong, I love feeling happy, but joy. Oh, joy is a different matter entirely. Joy is foundational. It is what allows you to not just keep standing up, but to keep looking up. God calls us to joy. The words happy and happiness are mentioned in the Bible about 30 times, depending on the translation. I'm not going to count. Let's just agree less than 100. Now, joy and its variations appear in the Bible more than 400 times. And again, I'm not going to be the one counting, but I think we can agree joy is a big deal. But now that I knew I hadn't been feeling joy, what was I going to do about it? I mean, at least happiness shows up and lands on you, right? This whole joy business was sounding like a lot of work. And you know what? It is work. Joy is an action word. We are called upon to be joyful always. That's 1 Thessalonians 5:16. To shout with joy in Psalm 100 and all over the Bible. And one of my favorite verses about joy is found in Isaiah 55:12. You will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and hills will burst into song before you, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. Man, that's joy. But how could I get to that point? You know, the point where I was being joyful and shouting with joy and going out in joy. How did I claim that when I'd misplaced my joy? I just didn't know how to get to it again in the midst of showing up for all the people and all the situations that needed me, because those situations, they weren't going to change. So clearly, it was up to me to change. But how? Well, I read a lot about joy. I mean, a whole lot. I love a good research project. I read and I prayed and I talked to people I knew. And I talked to people I didn't know. And I came up with an action plan. And yes, I know, I am that person. I came up with my own little action plan for joy. So I'll share some of it with you. First, I had to remember the difference between happiness and joy. I really had to remind myself that being happy, or being happy enough, wasn't filling my bucket. It wasn't lighting up my soul, and it was not the key to developing a closer relationship with God. If I'm happy, that's great. It's super duper to be happy. But I needed to remember that happiness does not sustain me. Joy totally does. Second, I reminded myself that joy and gratitude are forever linked. When you have a grateful spirit, you have just created a superhighway for joy, and it's huge. So we just had Thanksgiving dinner, and a lot of families have that tradition of going around the table and saying what you're grateful for. And that's lovely. We usually mention the bigger blessings like the family and the friends, the bounty of food, the beauty of the day. These things are great, and it is important to remember these big blessings. And yes, of course, they add to our joy. But what I learned is that it's the little gems of gratitude that collect and sparkle in our souls that add up to the big, deep, foundational joy. And you know why? Because these are all around us, all the time, everywhere. A perfect red and gold leaf spiraling down from a high branch. A brave little flower blooming in the midst of concrete. The first sip of coffee in the morning. A hello given and received. The clasped hands of a couple with many years of shared memories flowing between them. The more I looked, and the tiniest details I could note with gratitude, the bigger the impact on my overall joy. And I will say this without the slightest hesitation, doing that changed my life. The third and final thing is show it and share it. When you have the joy, 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 joy down in your heart, it will bubble up and out. It becomes your attitude and your altitude, and I guarantee people will notice and they will comment. So think about it. You aren't just sharing good news in that moment when somebody asks you about your energy or your attitude. You are sharing the good news, God's creation that gives you joy and sustains you and inspires you. And when you share that, when people see it on you and in you and around you, they are seeing your love for God and God's love for you. Reclaiming my joy didn't happen overnight. It required changing some patterns that had sneaked in, and that meant conscious effort to do things differently. But the more I looked for and noted those precious little joy gems, the more I saw all around me, all the time. And that foundational joy guided me through the challenging years with my dad, and again when my sweetheart was being swept away by Parkinson's. I still feel sadness, grief, challenge, irritation, frustration. These are human emotions, and we are having a human experience here, right? But through it all, seeking joy brightens and elevates my praise, my worship, and my ability to connect with the beauty and grace God has placed all around me. So here we are, years later, starting another Christmas season. I hope my story entertains you and maybe gave you something to think about. In closing, I'd like to offer the words of Fra Giovanni, a Franciscan friar. These were written in 1513 in his Christmas letter. I salute you. There is nothing I can give you which you have not, But there is much that while I cannot give, you can take. No heaven can come to us unless our hearts find rest in it today. Take heaven. No peace lies in the future which is not in the present moment. Take peace. The gloom of the world is but a shadow. Behind it, yet within our reach, is joy. Take joy. And so at this Christmas time, I greet you with the prayer that for you, now and forever, the day breaks and the shadows flee away. Amen.